Hi everyone, welcome to Python Osmosis, Episode 9, the screencast that slowly steps through the Python tutorial. I'm Ryan Shea, and in this episode we'll be talking about more on defining functions, default argument values. So I'm in my favorite Python shell here. We've talked about creating a definition, and we've talked about how to send information into that definition, but what we haven't done is default values. So let's create a new definition here. We're going to call this ask OK, which is going to do just that, ask you if everything is okay. And the first thing you have to pass to it is a prompt, what you wanted to ask on the command line, retries, but something important here, we're going to put an equals 4. So this means that there's a default value of retries to 4. If the user doesn't send anything to ask OK outside of a prompt, that's okay. It's going to use 4 as a default for retries. We're going to make a new variable called complaint, and that's going to be if you do something wrong, yes or no please, and we'll close that off. Alright, and we're going to create an infinite loop here, while true. We're going to ask the user for their input. Equals raw input. You remember that raw input function from before, and it's going to ask the user whatever we sent on the prompt variable there. It's going to collect that up into the OK variable. Now this is a new thing we haven't learned before. If OK in, if that variable OK, what we collected on the prompt, is in this list. This is going to be the sort of affirmative list, y, ye, yes. Then return true. And notice I put the entire conditional statement on one line. It's okay, you can do that. It's not recommended. It's probably best to put that onto the next line, but just for brevity, I'm going to put it on the same line. If OK in, this is the negative, n, no, nope, return false. So now we have two conditions there, and each time we loop through this infinite loop, we're going to increment the variable retries, which we have by default set to 4. Take 1 off of it. And then if we get to less than 0 in that loop, we're going to do something new here. We're going to raise an exception. In this case, IO error. And then we can specify what we'd like that error to, what message we'd like to send along with it. I'll just say that. And then we need to print that out, the complaint that we have as our default value, yes or no please. So that's only going to happen if it doesn't match the other conditionals, if it's not a yes or a no or a nope or something like this. It's going to print out that yes or no please. Okay, so now we have our definition, and let's take it for a test drive here. So ask OK. Are you happy today? And then we're not going to pass anything else to this function. Even though it needs retries and it needs a complaint, it's going to take those default values. Are you happy today, it asks me, and I'll say why. True. And we can actually send values in to override those default values. So retries was 4, but let's make retries 1. And then I'm still going to leave off the complaint. Yes or no please is an appropriate complaint for me, so I'm going to leave that at the default. So foo, yes or no please, no, and it's going to return false. If I hit enter, yes or no please, yes or no please, I hit enter again, and that raises the exception, the IO error. One thing to note about creating these default argument values is that the value is interpreted at the definition point of the function. So let's create a variable called I, and we'll set it equal to 5. We'll make a new definition called f, and we'll give it a default argument with arg equals I. Okay, and all that's going to do is print out arg. So let's say I reset I and make that equal to 6. Now what is the function f going to do? Is it going to print 5 or is it going to print 6? Well, it's going to print 5 because that was evaluated at the time that the definition was interpreted, and at that time it was 5. Now let me show you an example that may be a little bit more appropriate for why that's important. So let's remake def f, and we're going to say A is the first thing that's passed into it, L is an empty list. And we're going to do L.append A. So what this does is calls the append method on the type list. L, we created an empty list, and it's going to append whatever we sent in for the A value to the list. And this will return L. Okay, it's going to give it right back to us. So let's try this out. Print f of 1. It's going to print that list that's returned by passing 1 into this function. And we get a list that's 1. All right. What do we expect here? A list that's 2, right? No. It maintains that state, and we have 1, 2, 3. So it doesn't necessarily do what you'd expect. If we go back up, we would expect each time this is called that it reinitializes this list L, and we have an empty list. But that's not the case. If you want to do that, you can, but let's do it a little bit differently. We're going to actually set the default value to none, and we're going to have a condition within the definition. So def f a L equals none. Okay, and then we'll just say if L is, we haven't talked about is, but that's complete equality. If it is none, L equals, boom, empty list. So I'm setting that equal to an empty list, and L dot append A, and of course return L. So now when we go back, f of 1, f of 2, 3, it reinitializes each time. So that's how you do that. That's all for now. This screencast is directly inspired by the official Python tutorial by Guido van Rossum at python.org.